call to order the select board meeting for June 10th, 2019. We've just come out of an hour of executive session for a couple different reasons. Tonight we will have announcements and review the agenda, followed by public comment and then the town manager's report. Within the town manager's report, we may talk about schedule. We will discuss and then ratify the annual appointments of the town manager. We will discuss disbanding the Economic Development Committee. We will consider the different proposed liaison assignments of the select board members. And then we will review and revise the select board goals, which members are assigned to them. Under other business, we will talk about select mass work grants that the town may want to apply for fiscal 2020. We will consider approving language submitted to the Mass State Legislature regarding the land swap for Olivia Way. And then we have our ongoing issues, which we may get updates on. We have an opportunity for liaison reports, and we have one set of minutes to be reviewed and approved from June 3rd. So going back up, does anyone have any announcements? All right, we will jump into public comment. Anyone? Oh, Marlena.
So I'm gonna pass this down to...
You're welcome to sit at the table too if you would rather.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, I appreciate
Is this copies for everyone?
Yeah, I think I made enough copies for everyone. So I watched the video, and I apologize I couldn't be here, because I felt like I had some information that I could have shared regarding that SOI, because Dr. Chesson reads from the SOI as legitimately written, which it says, we want to bring all our Groton kids back. So I just wanted to give you some background on where that came from. It wasn't like there was a group of Groton individuals that said, hey, I want to bring my kids back. And there wasn't any group of Dunstable residents that said, I want my kids back in Dunstable. How it established, and there's certainly meetings documenting this. Unfortunately, like any other board, the meeting minutes doesn't capture every little word that's said, just an overall high level. So basically, Bill Ryan, when he wrote the SOI, he wrote it for the purpose of getting funding for the most needed capital item for our district. And he's been around the block several hundred times. He's done this many, many times. So when he wrote it, he knew his experience with the MSBA lended to the concept that the MSBA strongly supports community elementary schools. Dunstable has one, and although Groton has one, not all Groton students can go to it. So that was a selling point. He knew that. He utilized that in the SOI to try and get on that list for the funding. He also, obviously, it didn't take much thought to see all the other things wrong with Florence Roach. But he wrote it in such a way that got us on the first try. So he did a very good job in getting us on that. From there, he explained to us in our several different meetings that part of the feasibility study will include the entire district to a certain extent, because we are a regional agreement. So when he explained that to us, and as we changed hands from superintendents, I felt, and as well as many other school committees felt, that this feasibility study is not going to be limited to Florence Roach. We knew from having the build our own audit that we had some availability in different buildings for other students to be moved around, possibly. And we knew Swallow Union had room. We also knew how beloved Swallow Union is to Dunstable. But there was a couple different things that we needed to have happen. We needed support from both towns to pay for the feasibility study, and there has to be something in it for somebody to want to pay for it. And for Dunstable, what that was the possibility of looking at the condition of Swallow Union and the thought process of maybe we can bring our kids back to Dunstable for those younger elementary school years. In the same capacity, so could Groton. So they were on board with the feasibility study for that purpose. So Dunstable does get some knowledge from it, and they do get some value from it. But unless we actually negotiated with the MSBA on those conference calls, which there were many of them, they were not going to do that. We would have had to do this feasibility study, pay for it ourselves, meaning Groton taxpayers pay for ourselves, and Dunstable would still get that valuable information. The school committee did not feel that it was fair. Not just Groton school committee members, Dunstable school committee members as well, because it was myself and Jennifer McKenzie that were on those phone calls. So after many phone calls and literally getting to a point of being so close during the discussions, I was told, if you don't like the way the SOI is written, well then you could rescind it and submit a new one. And no, I do not want to be known as the person who tossed away $30 million for taxpayers. We just want to do the study. So the SOI was strategically written to get in that line. After that, it was the school committee that convinced the MSBA to include Dunstable in the research. Now, what the research will tell us is what our options are. You know, grade reconfiguration, all of that. The concept of bringing Dunstable kids back to Dunstable and Groton kids back to Groton for the elementary school is for that community school. There's value in that. There's an educational value in that. However, from my perspective as a Groton school committee member and a Groton taxpayer, because you can't separate the two in some aspects in your mind, the reality is, if Groton students, if my constituents are in Swallow Union and they don't come back to Groton, what will happen is I will be asking my taxpayers to pay for a renovation or a rebuild or an add-on something to help the current students that are in Florence Roach. And then in 10, 15 years, then again also, because my students are in Swallow Union still, I'm gonna actually then have to fund that too. So from a financial point of view, it is my perspective that, quite frankly, if I can get every single Groton student back home, Swallow Union will be the responsibility of Dunstable. And whatever solution we can find in Florence Roach, which I hope to be in part utilize existing space at the middle school to start with. I don't know if that's gonna work out. We don't know. The feasibility study could say a million different things. But, so there's value in both parties here. So that's one part. I wanted to make sure you guys knew where the SOI stemmed from, because there wasn't any group that wanted kids anywhere. It was a Bill Ryan with experience of how to write an application that is a winning application. And the proof is in the pudding. First time in, we got it. Now, what we do from that is totally up to us. You know, if we do the feasibility study and we don't like what it says, well, we got a lot of knowledge, a lot of information. Dunstable paid for 23% of it, and we got 48% out of all the total. So the study itself is a big win, in my opinion, as it is. Now, where we go from there, we're gonna have to see what the feasibility study says. So that's the information, the kind of background that, and I apologize, I wish I could have been here, but Ryan was not on the school committee then. He did not have conversations at that level. Laura was working from a document. She was not in on those conversations. So it was very hard for her to decipher that background information of where Bill Ryan was coming from. And I did have in-depth conversations with him and the MSBA. So I wanted to share that with you tonight. The last point, and I won't take up much more of your time, I did hear in the video concerns about how much money the school is asking for from the assessments. And quite frankly, I get it. It's a large number to ask for every year, right? In part, the state's not giving us any more money, but our expenses are going. But what I wanted to express to everyone on the board is this information that I just handed out to you, it's on our website under transparency. Click. It's from ClearGov. All it does is it takes the DESE information, transposes it into the website. We don't touch it. We have nothing to do with it. It's what's reported to DESE. And you can have charts after charts after charts. We have comp districts. We are spending, and I'm going to go from memory here, so you guys can correct me, 6.8% lower than our comps overall per pupil. Now, I'm one of those people that per pupil can mean many different things because you don't know what's included in that, right? It could be benefits, it could be many different things. Bottom line is, if you look at that chart, the one thing that sticks out to me is benefits. Now, it could be that some of our comps, they're municipal districts, so the benefits is split a little bit differently. We pulled every lever that we have in our district right now. We are the only entity that literally laid off 17 people in the almighty want to save money. We have another 19 people that when they retire will not be contracted. They will not be employees of this district in a manner to decrease our expenses for benefits mainly, because it's benefits that's benefits and salary. You hear Bud Robinson say it all the time. It's true. It's a reality. So the municipal did some work as well in your split. That is something that we'll be looking at during contract negotiations. But what I wanted to express to you is, I know that sometimes it does seem like the district is always asking for money. But if the state was giving us more money, we wouldn't have to ask our taxpayers for more money, and that's just not happening. The regional districts were sold a bad case of goods, and now we're stuck here. So I just wanted to share that information with you. If you have questions for me, you're more than welcome to I know I'm not on the agenda, but I wanted to share the information.
I have one question, Marlena.
Sure.
The comps that are referenced here, is that our market basket of comps that the school
So-
committee and administration use, or is that the DESI comps that are kind of built into the?
It's comprised of we started off with the DESI comps, the darts, but then we also included, and there was a methodology, so I apologize, I still feel like I'm on a plane at one point, but basically, it's comprised of, property value, our incomes, that we basically want to do apples to apples. We comprised this comp list, and it is on our website. It is specifically on the ClearGov with the identification of why they were chosen, but it was the enrollment, special education percentage. It was lunch, what do you call it?
Yeah, free and reduced.
Yes, thank you, free and reduced lunch. So the different factors that go into, your ability to pay, if you will. And then, of course, they'd have to be some sort of in our competing range of our academic abilities. So it was a really thought out process. I think we selected them, might have been just after you started on the select board. So I don't think, but I recall, and I think that at the time, actually, Jack was on the board of selectmen and Josh was there, and they actually were listening to the methodology on that.
Yep.
So anyway, so they're specifically selected.
Great, thank you. So I know this wasn't on the agenda. Are there any quick questions that folks have, or?
I have a quick,
Yeah, John.
quick question.
John Geiger.
The dilemma that we're caught in collectively is the state isn't giving you as much money, and the taxpayers don't want to pay more taxes, and you don't want to see overrides. So as I look at all that, we're just backed into a corner collectively, right? And something's got to give. And every time the town spends a dime, and members with kids in the school system say, "Oh, you can't do that. We need it." It's getting down and dirty, if you ask me, and I'm concerned about that. And somehow the community has to understand that either we pay more taxes or we convince the state, and there is some legislation going there, but it's probably 5 to 7 years before we really feel the impact of it from the presentations I've seen. Or we just can't do as much as we're doing in the school district.
Or on the
that's-
town side.
Hmm?
Or on the town side, potentially.
Or on the town side.
Right.
We're just,
Well, I agree with you. I think.
and so when we have a big school building project, and honestly, I was really surprised at some of the things that were said last week. Things like, well, that's somebody else's problem, it's not mine. I don't like to hear that. It's ours. That was said by the superintendent when we asked the question about, where did this SDI, whatever that thing is,
SOI.
SOI.
where did that come from? Who initiated it? Who originated it? I don't know. That's not my problem. That's just very discomforting to me. So we just gotta work together, but we gotta figure out a way to do this. My concern was then and still is that we're looking at all alternatives. And trying to find a solution that is economically feasible for the district and economically feasible for the town.
I agree with you 100%. I think it's possible. I mean, we have the working group, just this morning we met and we're discussing, my challenge in regards to the override is, first of all, I'd support any override that I believe we need, 100%. school and municipal, the services, my philosophy always has been DPW, fire, police, schools. They are an equal priority in my personal opinion. I have no challenge with supporting more funding for that aspect. I know that there's some people that cannot just fiscally do it. My challenge is we have to, before we can do that, as we discussed this morning, we really have to get down to authentic numbers, reviewing our free cash, educating people in regards to the amount of free cash we have, how we may or may not be able to restructure in a manner where we're not certifying as much free cash, but allowing more to flow for operating expenses to avoid an override, not an override, even maybe decrease what an override could be. So, and that's what we're working with this morning and have been as the working group. And it's been very productive conversations. For the first time, I think, that I can remember where we've had the district and the municipal in the same room actually talking about in a respectful manner of what we can do to get it done. So I think that that's happening. The state giving more money, I'm very reluctant of that's being a reality soon enough for us. But I do think that the feasibility study will give us the most cost-effective option, not only for the district, but for Groton. There could be a cost-effective option that's for the district, but Groton taxpayers could or could not want to support it. We don't know. And the same thing for Dunstable. So the feasibility study, it's not going to leave any stones unturned. You know, the difference is spending money on a schematic, like a full-blown schematic design for a large unified school, knowing that the MSBA will not give us reimbursement, and knowing that Dunstable doesn't want it, is money not well spent. We can actually do a calculation. The OPM, we're having a building committee meeting, I want to say
25th.
Thank you. And I had already asked them for back of the envelope. They've been doing this many years. They know per square feet, per student, what the MSBA will reimburse for, and approximate cost for that. It's a formula that the MSBA uses. So if we know how many kids for a large school, we'll be able to actually say, okay, I want back of the envelope numbers. I want all of the elementary kids, Dunstable and Groton, calculated for. We're not gonna get reimbursement. How much will it cost though? And then I wanna know what would it cost with reimbursement? Because we have two partners that we could possibly play here. Groton does. We could partner with Dunstable as a huge school, or we could partner with the MSBA. The reality is, to partner with the MSBA, we get 48% of our reimbursement. To partner with Dunstable, we only get 23%. But I still want to see what those numbers look like, because when you're building a bigger project and you have more people sharing and more kids, we have the majority of the kids, so I'm guessing that result is going to be it's cheaper more economical to work with the MSBA. But I did ask for the OPM. I don't know if anyone's attending that meeting, but if you do, that's going to be information that they're going to have, just so we can see what it looks like.
One member of the board had asked, they were supposed to meet tomorrow night, but because there's a graduation tomorrow,
Yep.
we canceled tomorrow's meeting of the building committee. We rescheduled for the 25th. Josh had asked that I post it just in case members of the board wanted to attend, so I will go ahead and post that meeting. It's held in the middle school,
Yep.
in the superintendent's wing
Yep.
there.
So
That'll
there'll be
be 6
information.
o'clock on the 25th.
So there'll be information there, back of the envelope, but, spending on each schematic design, we want to make sure we spend that money wisely, and get all the answers that we can, use all our resources to get our answers.
So I appreciate your coming forward. I appreciate the conversation we had last week. I know it was heated. And I appreciate the superintendent and Ryan kind of bearing with us. I think that everyone at this point agrees that Florence Roach has incredible needs. So we'll have to continue these conversations and go through feasibility and
Find a solution.
find a solution. But
I acknowledge and
Yeah.
have for years, having been in the building during one of the snow blizzards with the building committee, the superintendent of building and grounds trying to get a darn boiler going again.
Yeah.
And I've had lots of complaints over the years about leaks in the roof.
Mm-hmm.
And we did put a new roof on it about 3
Yeah.
years ago, and I I haven't heard any complaints recently, so,
Yeah.
but we gotta do something there. I just wanna see us do it with a long-range view of how
Absolutely.
it fits into a scheme for the district that's gonna make us providing the best education for our students in the Commonwealth, and at the same time, being very economical and thoughtful and planning in the whole picture.
Yeah.
So the building committee, almost by name, sounds like, oh, they're gonna build a building, which we probably are. But there's no ring there that says, and by the way, we're looking at the big picture.
Yeah, and for the record,
For the
being
long
on the
term.
building committee, I'm hoping we don't build a building. I'd love an addition. But
Well, whatever
we'll
it
see
is.
what happens.
Right.
We'll see what happens. Whatever works best financially and educationally.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so Mark.
Yes, so tonight we have my annual appointments that I would like to make, subject to board ratification. As is our practice, I will read the names into the record page by page. I will ask the select board to consider ratifying them page by page. Because of requests from the board, I am going to be doing some appointments separately based on positions that board members have alerted me to. Yes, Becky?
So, just before you start
Yes.
in, I had questions about what some of these groups do. And rather than interrupt as we're going through, is it okay if I ask those questions?
More than happy to answer any question you have.
So what is NIMS?
NIMS,
Yes.
that is a training that we have to go through in terms of emergency management. There are certain levels that you have to take, and there's a person that's responsible for coordinating that. That's the NIMS coordinator.
Okay,
John, do you know what NIMS stands for?
National Incident Management System.
Thank you.
okay.
Some of us have already been trained in.
Exactly, no, I understand.
And then, following on a theme here, we have a lot of different emergency things.
Yep,
So we have the Emergency Response Coordinator,
yep,
and that's a one person?
yes it is.
Okay, then we have the Emergency Management Agency. That's a
Yep.
whole large group of people. What do they do?
They support the emergency management director when an emergency is declared, say a hurricane or something along those lines. These are people that we call on to volunteer to help us man shelters if we have to open up a shelter, the emergency operations center, answer phones if we have to do that. They are the people that we call on, and they're the volunteers that we help do that.
Okay, and then we have both local emergency planning and regional emergency planning, and those are done by different,
Yeah, the local emergency planning, those are the people who work with the emergency management director who I'm going to appoint tonight. That's gonna be an additional appointment that I'm gonna be making tonight. That they assist that person in carrying out planning and things like that. You know, whether or not we need more supplies, how we're gonna address if a hurricane is coming, how we're going to respond to that, what actions we're gonna take, what shelters we may or may not open, things like that.
okay.
I hope we never have to,
Right, so we have both an emergency response coordinator and an emergency, you said the new one.
the emergency management director,
What's
who I'll be
the,
appointing tonight. He's the one that oversees all these committees and all the operations.
okay, so the director and the coordinator are two different positions and
Correct.
two different people, and that
Yep.
makes sense?
And the regional planning committee, those are the people that represent us when they have regional meetings. If something's going on down at Meme Framingham and we need to send people,
Okay.
those are the people we send.
Okay, and then, what is the Insurance Advisory Committee?
That is a Chapter 32B statutorily required committee that is made up of representatives from non-union, union, and retirees. And if we're going to make a change in either plan design, or we want to add additional insurance carriers and things like that, before I can bring it to the unions to negotiate that separately, the Insurance Advisory Committee has to meet, review, and make a recommendation.
So it's all about health insurance?
Correct.
Okay. And I know I've commented on this before, it's a little bit confusing to me that some of these positions are like full-time salaried positions.
Yep.
Some of them are stipends, and some of them are completely volunteer.
Yep.
I don't know whether it would make sense to show that distinction on the list?
Oh,
For me, it might,
I suppose we could do that.
mean,
Is
it
that
just
something
seems-
that we need for tonight, or is that something, Mark, that you can just kind of mark up
I could do
at some
that.
point, whether it's salaried, stipended,
Sure.
or volunteer? Is that?
Yep.
yeah, in the future, I think that would make it
Yeah.
easier to understand.
We can add that to the list in
Thank
the
you.
future. I'm just making a note. Okay, so I will read them into the record and assume that these terms expire on June 30th, 2020, unless otherwise noted. I'm gonna read the list. Dawn will work the thing so the people at home can see the names. So I'm appointing ADA Coordinator Michelle Collette, Animal Control Officer, Dog Officer Tom Delaney, George Moore, Animal Inspector George Moore, Building Inspector Dan Britko.
Have a
Okay,
question on that?
Please.
Where does Ed Cataldo fit in this?
He's the
thing?
Building Commissioner. I will get to that later.
Okay,
Cable Access Director Bob Coleman, Communication Officers Chris Carter, Warren Gibson, Catherine Meyer, Sarah Power, Jonathan Shattuck, John Wex, Samuel Welch, Edward Bushnell as a part-time dispatcher, Michael McGregor as a relief dispatcher, and Leah Pierce as a relief dispatcher. Nicholas Guelco, Conservation Administrator, George Moore, Constable, term to expire June 30th, 2022. Council on Aging Director Kathy Shelp. I'd ask the board to consider ratifying those appointments.
So moved.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Country Club GM Head Golf Professional Sean Campbell, Database Coordinator April Moulton, Earth Removal Inspector Michelle Collette. Election Workers, Judith Anderson, Alicia Black, Audrey Bryce, Marvin Caldwell, Gail Chalmers, Carol Clark, Michelle Collette, Anthony Cassetti, Irene Cassetti, Joan Croto, Peter Cunningham, Carol Daigle, Charlene Depolito, Dorothy Davis, Janice DeCipio, Michael DeCipio, Dan Emerson, Alberta Erickson, George Faircloth, Maureen Faircloth, Louise Gaskins, Judy Geiger. Do you want me to do that one separate? John?
No.
Okay. Judy Geiger, John Guimon, Wendy Jones, Stephen Legg, Lorraine Leonard, Cindy Martell, Paula Martin, Richard Martin, Lisa O'Neill, Edward Perkins, Donna Pichet, Robert Pichet, Nancy Pierce, Katrina Posner, Art Press, Nathaniel Rainey, Gina Ryan, Suzanne Sanders, Harold Sanford, Connie Sartini, Stuart Schulman, Fran Stanley, Aristhea Staub, Alberta Steed, Rena Sweezy, Janet Thompson, Ramona Tolles, Jeffrey Upton, Richard Van Doren, Bronan Wallens, Margaret Wheatley, and Alex Woodle. I'd ask the select board to ratify those appointments.
So-
Is Rena still a town resident?
She is not, but she is still the warden for precinct 3.
Right, that was actually another question I had. There's no requirement
To live in town.
to live in town.
That is correct.
Okay, fine.
So moved to approve those.
So was it moved?
Yes.
Yeah.
Seconded?
Very good. Any other questions? All in favor?
Electrical Inspector Ed Doucette, John D., the alternate. Executive Assistant to the Town Manager Don Dunbar, Fence Viewer George Moore, Field Driver George Moore, Graves Registration Officer Deborah Beal Normanin, Harbor Master Mike Luth, Hazmat Coordinator Steele McCurdy, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Officer Melissa Doig, Human Resources Director Melissa Doig, IT Director Michael Chasen, Keeper of the Town Clock Paul Matisse, Land Use Director Town Planner Takashi Tada, Local Licensing Agent Michael Luke, James Cullen, Measurer of Wood and Bark Evan Owen. I'd ask the board to ratify those appointments.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Moth Superintendent Tom Delaney, NIMS Coordinator Michael Luth, Parking Clerk Don Dunbar, Plumbing and Gas Inspector Norm Card with John Templeton as the alternate. Within the Police Department, Deputy Chief James Cullen, Matrons Bernadette Georges, Catherine Myers, Kathleen Newell, Sarah Power. Sergeants Derek Gimos, Kevin Hennihan, Rachel Mead, Ed Sheridan. Officers Nicholas Belt, Robert Bro, Peter Breslin, Gordon Candell, Paul Cannell, Omar Connor, Andrew Davis, Michael Lynn, Dale Rose, Gregory Stewart, Patrick Timmons, Peter Violet, Corey Waite. Reserve Officers Matthew Beal, Matthew Bovin, Kathleen Newell, Casey O'Connor, Michael Ratty, and Jonathan Shattuck. Public Works Director Tom Delaney. I would request that the board ratify those appointments.
So moved.
Second, either way. Any
have a-
discussion? Yes.
Yeah, Pierce has some sort of a designation, as a special or something like that?
Not anymore.
Not anymore,
Not anymore.
okay, thank you.
All
Does the
in
board vote?
favor?
Sorry.
Aye.
All right.
My favorite appointment of the year, roadkill officer Tom Delaney, sale of weights and measures Eric Altonen, survey of wood and lumber Tom Delaney, town diarist Connie Sartini and Robert Collins, tree warden Tom Delaney, veteran service officer Robert Johnson, water superintendent Thomas Orcutt. I'd ask the board to ratify those appointments.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Now, I'm going to ask the board for an opinion on these next appointments. Under the revised charter, I nominate for appointment these positions, and then the board makes the appointment. Under the current charter that has not been ratified yet, I make the appointment, the board ratifies the appointment. How would you like to proceed? Should we follow the current charter that we're under until the new one is ratified?
I'm sorry, what did you,
I
what's
think
the
so.
difference?
There really isn't a difference. It was, John can tell you, it was a semantic argument that the charter committee had. It's still, I have to bring the name forward.
So this is just for the agricultural?
This is for all boards and committees.
Okay, and under the new charter, it will be
I
what?
nominate for appointment, you appoint. Under the old charter, I appoint, you ratify the appointment. It's a distinction that I have no idea why, but that's the way it is.
Well, why don't you just nominate them?
Do you want to follow the new charter? Because I'm more than happy to follow whatever you want to do.
I think we should.
Does it-
We all thought that the charter should have been approved a year ago, right?
I agree. But I just legally, the current charter is still what we're operating under. So should we follow that?
I feel like legally we should.
think you have to.
I mean,
Okay.
whatever's
I just
true.
wanted to make
Yeah.
that point because this will be the last time we do it this way. All right,
Yep,
that's
okay.
fine.
We hope.
So the Agricultural Commission, terms to expire June 30th, 2022, George Moore, Sally Smith. The Cable Advisory Committee, Jane Bouvier, Neil Colicchio, Robert Pichet, Janet Sheffield. Commission on Accessibility, Ellen Baxendale, Robert Fleischer, Mark Shack, Alan Taylor, Carol Ann Sutton, William Barron, those are two alternates. Community Emergency Response Coordinators, Robert Delaney, Michael Lutz, Steele McCurdy, Bill Shute. Conduct the Lab Committee, Michelle Collette, Mark Duga, Robert Hannanen, Susan Horowitz, Stuart Schulman. I'd ask the board to ratify those appointments.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Earth Removal Advisory Committee, Ray Capes, Thomas Delaney, Robert Hannanen, Edward Perkins, Eileen McHugh. Emergency Management Agency, Pat Arrow, Stephen Byrne, Gail Chalmers, Peter Cunningham, Francis Cusack, Daniel Dagno, Tom Delaney, Edward Doucette, Heather Emsley, Mark Haddad, Penny Homeyer, Susan Horowitz, Holly Jarrett, Leroy Johnson, Robert Johnson, Kevin Kelly, Steve Legg, Catherine Lincoln, Michael Luth, Frank Mastrangelo, George Moore, Stephen Moulton, Steele McCurdy, Alvin Neff, Kathy Newell, Thomas Orcutt, Christine Packard, Benjamin Pozziadlo, Kathy Puff, Karen Reef, Connie Sartini, Kathy Shelp, William Shute, Bill Van Shalwick. Great Ponds Advisory Committee, Marshall Jaguar, Susan Horowitz, James Leaning, Art Press, George Wheatley, Alex Woodle. I'd ask the board to ratify those appointments.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Greenway Committee, Adam Burnett, Carol Coutrier, Carol Greenfield, David Pitkin, Marion Stoddard. Historical Commission with a term to expire June 30th, 2022, Michael Dante, Robert DeGroot, George Wheatley. The Historic Districts Commission with a term to expire June 30th, 2022, Greg Premru. The Insurance Advisory Committee, Michelle Collette, George Brackett, Gordon Kendall, Kathy Schelt, Barbara Cronin, Melissa Doig, Derek Gemos, Warren Gibson, Paul McBreedy, Hannah Mola, Rena Sweezy. Local Emergency Planning Committee, Bob Coleman, Tom Delaney, Susan Horowitz, Holly Jarrett, Kevin Kelly, Leroy Johnson, Michael Lutz, Steele McCurdy, George Moore, Thomas Orcutt, Kathy Puff, Kathy Schelt, William Shute. Old Burying Ground Commission, Amanda Gavazzi, Eleanor Gavazzi. The Recycling Committee, Tessa David, Tom Delaney, Jamie King, Diane Keeney, and Val Press. I'd ask the board to ratify those appointments.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
The Regional Emergency Planning Committee, Michael Lutz, Steele McCurdy, William Shute. The Senior Center Building Committee, John Amaral, Michelle Collette, Peter Cunningham, George Faircloth, Gary Green, Moran Coesian, Annika Rips. Sign Committee, Joshua Deegan, Mark Haddad, Carolyn Perkins. Town Forest Committee with a term to expire June 30th, 2022, John Sheedy. Trails Committee, Kevin Barrett, Paul Funch, Owen Lathrop, Steve Legg, Juan Fang Murray, James Perigoy, Robert Orderman, Jason Remiard. Weed Harvester Committee, John Kroll, Garrett Durling, Eric Garger, Bradley Harper, James Leaning, William Strickland. The Williams Barn Committee, Bruce Eason, Robert Niffen, Kathy Stone, Joseph Toomey, Sandra Tobias, Alfred Wyatt, Leo Wyatt. I'd ask the board to ratify those appointments.
So moved.
And seconded.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
These country club staff appointments are seasonal through June 30th. These are appointments that I probably would have had under the town manager's report separate. I just put it on my annual appointment list. Jordan Payer, Matteo Chaikin, Adam Bosch, Nathan Bosch, Declan Lowney, George Lowney, Tiana Montiero. I'd ask the board to ratify those appointments.
So moved.
And seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Building Commissioner Ed Cataldo. I'd ask the board to ratify that appointment.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
So that was 3-1.
Yep.
Board of Survey, Edward Cataldo as the Building Commissioner, Steele McCurdy as the Fire Chief, Evan Owen. That Board of Survey, those two positions, Building Commissioner and Fire Chief, are statutorily required to be on there. I'd ask the board to ratify those appointments.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Highway Department Building Committee, John Amaral, Michael Bouchard, John Geiger, David Menugi, and Val Press. I'd ask the board to ratify those appointments.
So moved.
Second.
I have a question on this one, Mark.
Yep.
If, given that Josh isn't here, this is gonna be a split vote, because unless John is comfortable appointing himself.
I'm gonna abstain.
Right, and I'm gonna abstain, because David's on there,
Oh,
so we may wanna divide that out even into two.
all right, let me do it this way. I'm gonna
Sorry.
appoint John Amaral, Mike Bouchard, John Geiger, Val Press. I'd ask the board to ratify those 4 appointments.
So moved.
And seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
One abstention.
Yep.
I'd ask the board to ratify the appointment of David Menugi into the Highway Department Building Committee.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I'll abstain.
Yep, and I would ask the board, thank you for clarifying that, Allison. And I would ask the board to ratify my appointment of Fire Chief Steele McCurdy as the Emergency Management Director.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That concludes the town manager's annual appointments. Next week, we will be bringing forward the board, the select board's annual appointments, and we will follow a similar, I'll read the names into nomination for the board to consider appointing. Those are the board's appointments. So, moving on to my town manager report. Based on my discussions with the chair and former members of the committee, it's been recommended that the Economic Development Committee be disbanded. I did invite the current chair to the meeting tonight. I know the Economic Development Committee held a meeting last week and discussed this very topic.
Yep.
I will turn it over to the board's liaison, Allison, for that discussion, so all yours.
Yeah, so we met, and this was one of the things we talked about, basically when the Economic Development Committee was created and appointed probably 8 or 10 years ago.
8 years ago.
There were a couple charges or things that the group was tasked with looking at. One was considering and working to change kind of the impression that folks had that Groton wasn't business friendly. And then the other one was to look at revenue, particularly looking at commercial retail kind of revenue and how that would impact and benefit residential tax rates. So those two issues at this point have been handled. The reality the group agreed was that there is no real impact on the residential, tax rate or tax payments, even if additional commercial properties come onto the tax rolls, and that there's not really any ability to impact that in a significant way. So the members, we've been talking for a couple of meetings about what are our next goals and what do we want to take on. There are still members who are very interested in the future of Groton, but most of the discussion and areas of interest don't really fall under economic development. So the group ultimately, a motion was made to support the disbanding of that committee. And then it was requested that individuals on that committee, either as a slate or as individuals, be included potentially in some sort of capital or a master planning, effort, should the planning board appoint a new group to look at that.
And they'll be starting, next year.
Right.
A new master planning?
Yeah, the 10-year plan,
10-year
Becky, needs to be
update.
updated next year.
Ah,
Well, let's start the process. At least start the process. I think you accidentally hit the dial button.
Yeah, I did. I don't think I've
Just hit the hang up. Yep.
technology near me. So the board was fine with that. I do think there are some very strong, interested, and enthusiastic volunteers on the committee, and we'll want to make sure that we retain them on the part, to benefit our community. But Economic Development Committee seems to have done
So-
what was charged.
Seems to me like a piece of correspondence from the select board to the chair of the planning board
Mm-hmm.
would be in order to somehow document.
Yep.
Nelson, I'll work with you on that.
Yep.
so, I guess I have a couple questions about this.
Yep.
I don't think I was a little bit confused. Did the Economic Development Committee ever feel like part of their purview was to help recruit tenants for vacant or unused or underutilized commercial property in Groton?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Part of the discussion that we had this past meeting, and we've had it in the past, was that a lot of communities who are doing that kinds of things have an employee, either a part-time or a full-time employee who has some capacity, ability to really do that. The reality is, as a volunteer board, we didn't feel like we had any viable kind of methodology to do that. We did work with folks who came forward periodically interested in either bringing their business or starting a new business or targeting, a specific building, and we would talk with them and make recommendations at times. But there was no real mechanism for EDC to do that kind of work.
Right, that sort of makes sense, but it doesn't mean that there's kind of a void where just essentially, as a town, it's up to commercial realtors to be doing that work of trying to market and fill empty property, right?
Yeah, I think that's,
And I don't know that I have any solutions for how to do it differently, other than if we had an employee on staff, but even then, I don't know that would be really a good use of our money, because
Some towns do have, Air has somebody on staff, Grafton has somebody on staff, and they actively go out and recruit businesses to come to town. I don't think financially we would be able to support that position.
right.
Like Air shares theirs with someone.
They probably do, yeah.
Do you think that one of the purposes you mentioned to address a sense that Groton was not friendly to business, did that get done? Or do you think that the disbanding of this committee will somehow be seen or feed some kind of anti-business
Can I
sentiment?
address that?
yep.
The Economic Development Committee, when it first was constituted, was actually 10 years, it was when I became town manager, that was their first year, so 11 years ago, when they were first formed. One of their goals was to work with me to improve the permitting process upstairs, and we came up with a form of intent, we consolidated the land use departments, and they were very helpful in setting that up, and it's a sea change in terms of business-friendly use here. So I don't think disbanding the Economic Development Committee is gonna change that, because that's done by staff. And I receive nothing but accolades from our staff now, from people about how cooperative we are and how friendly and coordinated things are. Online permitting has really helped that as well. That has really been excellent. And I think the Four Corners work that we did, bringing that on board. I know Shaw's, because of the sewer system, has been out actively marketing their property. The Board of Health is gonna be sending out letters to require all the connections to happen soon. And I know that the fire chief and our land use department has received inquiries from potential tenants at Four Corners. So I know that that's an active, through their real estate people. So I don't think, to answer your question, Becky, I would say no, I don't think so.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because I've thought for a long time that that was really an outdated, if it ever was, a true perception. And so I don't want this disbanding of this committee to be somehow seen as, oh, you know, this town is not friendly to business, because I think that that's not true.
The other piece that we talked about briefly was that there is the Groton Board of Trade, and that
Right.
they, you know, as a community made of businesses and business people, they, you know, play part of that role as well.
Right, right.
But at the current time, it's only a relatively small portion of all business activities here in town.
That may be a reflection of how much business owners feel a need to network with other people. So I think we should thank the members who did serve on the EDC for their service.
Absolutely. So what do you need from us?
I would
Oh,
like the
sorry.
board, if the board is so inclined, to make a motion to disband the Economic Development Committee and further to direct the town manager to prepare letters of thanks to the current members of the committee for their service.
Jack, did you have?
Thank you. So I was interested to hear the initial mission of the EDC with regard to perception and of the permitting process, and then also the idea of bringing commercial development to town in the interest of generating revenue. I personally believe that that should be the limit of a committee like the EDC. I think, you know, there has been some demonstration of what it takes to understand whether commercial development is a viable way of reducing taxes, and I think that was done in a pretty consolidated way, and a demonstration that those things can be done. But I think there's a lot more that can be done. You know, I know that we spent some money to go and get a survey done to determine whether we could bring in 55+ housing, but a committee could have gone out and determined whether or not 55+ housing made sense in Groton, whether or not developers would be interested in a town like Groton, what kinds of things Groton could do to be attractive to those developers before we spent money on a survey. A committee could, there are economic development committees in many towns not requiring full-time people or even part-time people. And I think there's got to be a reason for that, and perhaps an economic development committee or a new group could go out and find out what is being accomplished in other towns with unpaid staff. Maybe they could go to developers of 55+ properties and ask what would be important, what would be useful. Maybe they could go to the Four Corners and say, what can the town do to help you? It's nice to hear that there's some interest, but it has been a couple of years now since we put in that sewer. So what I would urge is, I understand that the current committee has felt that it's time, perhaps some board members have felt that it's time, but I know that I and at least one other individual in the community would like to be able to bring forth to the committee or to the board some suggestions about what an EDC or an EDC-like group could do. So before you go ahead and disband it, I wonder if you'd be open to hearing suggestions and how that group might be reconstituted or rechartered and move forward. I think there's a lot that could be contributed, such as the commercial development capacity analysis, which I hope you agree was a valuable asset for the town to work off of, the kind of thing that the EDC had interest in.
If I may?
Yeah.
If that's a great suggestion, and if that's the intention of the board, if it's gonna be a reconstituted committee with a new charge and new ideas, obviously disbanding the current committee and waiting for a proposal to come in to create a new committee would make sense. I don't see any reason why you can't disband, and then when a recommendation comes in, create a new committee with a new charge. Makes sense?
I would certainly have no
Perhaps some
forethoughts
changes.
Yeah.
on what the mechanism would be, but I just wanted to be sure that the board didn't close the door on the viability of a similar kind of committee.
Mm-hmm. And are you comfortable, Jack, with that approach as opposed to kind of keeping things open, and is that?
Well, that's what I meant by saying I had no
Yeah.
plan on how you should do it, but I just want to be sure, I wanna see if the board has interest in hearing from the public on new ways of doing this sort of thing.
I would think so.
Yeah, my thought
I
is,
think it would
these
have a
people
different
have,
charter.
these people have recommended that we disband the committee that they're on. I think that's a fine direction to go in, and we would always, I think, be open to citizens who wanna come in and present a new idea, a new thought, a suggestion about something new and different. And in some ways, it would be, I think, better to not mix the two.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
I presume with a new committee, we would fine tune a charter for that committee.
Absolutely.
That was my point, yeah.
It's well
Yeah.
thought out and, got plenty of what we're trying to achieve identified and so forth and so on.
Mhm. So, did you need a motion?
Yes.
So I move that we accept the Economic Development Committee's recommendation that their committee be disbanded, and we thank them for their service. We direct the town manager to send letters thanking them for their service.
Okay.
I'll second it.
All right, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. This is a meeting, I put the liaison assignments up for the board's consideration. To help you, I've given you, if you go to page 12 in your packet, I've given you what last year's assignments were. And then what I did was I had sent that out to all the board members. So this was last year's assignments. I
I
sent
think
this out.
page 12 is the current.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I
proposal,
did it
right?
in reverse, you're right.
Yeah, okay.
So, page what, 13?
Yeah,
Is
14, I
the,
think.
14 is this year's
Yep.
current assignments. I put it in the packet
Yep.
backwards, I apologize. And then I sent this out to the board and I said, please let me know what you would like and I will set it up for consideration. I know Becky had direct requests, Josh had direct requests. John Riley said to me that, you know, he'd be willing to take on the positions that Barry had in the past unless somebody else wanted it. And John didn't have any preference, he would accept whatever the board, and I think Allison was the same. So what I did is I very clearly marked this draft for discussion purposes, based on what I heard from the board, and if the board signs off on this, I would send this out to all the boards and committees and departments tomorrow to let them know who the liaisons are to the various committees. So you can see Becky asked for police, Josh asked for fire. I believe Becky asked for Conservation Commission and Community Preservation Committee, Groton Electric. Josh asked for Highway, Water, and the Shoba Valley Tech, and the Building Commissioner. I left Josh with the Council on Aging, Becky with the Library, Allison with the Country Club, John with the Park Department. I put John Riley in with the Assessors because Barry had that in the past. Same with Human Resources Manager. I made one executive decision. Barry was the IT liaison. I put John in there because I know John has been working very closely with Mike on the website and things like that. I thought it'd be natural for you to be that liaison. So I made that assumption. That's one thing I did on my own. That's a recommendation to the board. And other than that, those are the proposals. So I'd ask the board to consider adopting this unless there's any changes you want to make.
Yes, Becky.
So, I did have something that occurred to me, and John, please don't take this personally.
Never.
I think that
It's hard to know which.
the liaison to the Human Resources Manager, since you are a town employee, I think that's not our wisest choice. I think we all need to be cognizant of potential conflict of interest and issues, and we as a board don't want to be party to that. So I personally think that's actually one that the chair should take. But I also looked at this list and I thought you need to have some more responsibilities. And I'm happy to, if you would rather do Groton Electric, I would be happy to turn that over to you.
I'm fine. That's fine. No worries.
All right, does anyone object to those two swaps?
So, I'm sorry, we're making Allison, HR Director, and
Liaison there too,
Liaison,
please.
rather. Yeah, thank you, I'm sorry. Allison, liaison to the HR Director, and,
John
John
Riley
to the electric light?
Groton Electric,
Okay.
yes.
See,
It's
there's a
not a
big
conflict of
raise.
interest. I have electricity at my house.
So do I. Yes, right.
Any other questions, comments, concerns?
They're a lovely group.
I do
and-
have one, question on Josh's, the council on aging. Did he wanna keep that?
You know, he didn't say. Would you like to take that?
I'd take that, 'cause
I don't think Josh would object.
I thought that was also a good fit for you. I mean, I know you've done a lot of work with them.
yeah, I'd take that.
Would folks like to give Josh the country club?
That would be fine. Then you get to.
Since he's
share
not here,
what-
can we approve Josh for all of the, no?
That'll teach him. So Josh will be Country Club?
Yeah.
All right, so this list is fine with the following 4 changes. Allison, HR Liaison, John Riley, COA and Electric Light Liaison, Josh, Country Club Liaison.
Yep.
I'd ask the board to adopt those liaison assignments.
So moved.
Second it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And then the final thing that I put in here is,
And you'll update that, Mark?
I'm gonna
Send
update
it to
this
us as
tomorrow,
well
send it
as-
to you and
yeah.
send it out to everybody.
Perfect.
Here are your goals, and there's one, you may want to change others, but Barry was the select board member assigned to the select board functioning. So the question is, do you want to, well, I think you should, because Barry's no longer on the board. Does somebody want to take over as the lead on this particular assignment? It may make sense to have the chair do that.
I think the chair.
Yeah, I agree with that. Given the benchmarks, that makes sense.
So then we'll leave everybody else, Josh with major initiatives, Becky with green communities, John with levels of public safety, Allison with policies, Josh and Allison with the school district, and Becky with housing, and John with IT. Those are all fine?
Yes,
Okay?
Yep. And we'll have John Riley assist with all of those.
Yes.
yes, he can.
Yep. Do you need us to make a motion on that,
Nope.
Mark, or is that?
Nope, that's fine. So into other business.
Yep.
I'm gonna skip to the second one, because that's mine, and then John Geiger asked for the other item under other business, to be put on the agenda, so we can take that up, but,
So
I
the land swap, sorry, it isn't in our packet, right? That came through as an
That-
email?
I sent you as an
That's fine.
email.
I
I'm
just wanna-
sorry.
Nope, that's,
So basically what happened was, we wanted to make sure that the legislation for the Olivia Way got done fast. So we jumped on it with town council, said, town council, please draft the legislation. We got a hold of Senator Kennedy and Representative Hamilton. We made sure they had the documentation. They have filed the legislation. We've sent documentation to the Senate Council and the House Council that this is the language. It does what we need it to do, but town council thought it'd be important to have a vote of the board approving it. So I should have probably said cart before the horse, but we were just in our haste to make sure, because the session ends in July, we did not want to have a charter 2-year process here. So we really jumped on it. So I would ask the board tonight to vote to approve that legislation that I sent out to you this morning.
I move we approve the language distribute, what?
it's called, so I would entertain a motion to approve the language of an act to authorize the conveyance by lease or easement and change of use of conservation land in the town of Groton, pertinent to Olivia Way.
Correct.
So moved.
Perfect. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Public.
It's Olivia
Olivia Way.
Is it misspelled up here? Oh, Oliver.
Oliver.
Dawn.
Thank you.
And do we need all of that to be approved by the legislature before they can do the whatever construction?
Absolutely, that's why,
Yeah.
Becky, that's why we really got it in right away, because unless there's that land swap and that approval under Article 97, which is a 2/3 vote of both houses, we can't do it. And the session ends in July.
Right,
That's for the
okay.
haste.
Okay.
All right, is there
Did we
any
vote?
discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And then, John, you had you asked for the other item to be added to the agenda.
I did. Yeah,
I put the document that you asked for in the packet.
yep, hold on a second.
So the other item is just a discussion of MassWorks grants,
Yep. It's on page,
19.
correct.
I saw this in the Mass Municipal Association's most recent monthly, and it occurred to me that I haven't heard any discussion about efforts to pursue grants as we move forward. And I remember as a new member last spring, Allison had a spreadsheet that was 40 columns wide and 39,000
specialty.
lines long of opportunities. And the reaction was, oh, there's nothing there that will help us. And I gotta believe that there's gotta be some things around that the town could benefit from that have grants associated with them. So I saw that there's a deadline here. I hadn't heard any discussion about it. I'm not sure that I'm the right person to identify where the grant opportunities are best. I think that really gets down to town employees and the town manager in terms of identifying where they see opportunities that would help us. And so that's why I asked to have this put on.
So does it make sense, Mark, and then to the board, to kind of bring that spreadsheet back and you and I can talk about it and, you know, pick out a handful that seem to make sense, and then we can talk about those specifically next week as opposed to the whole.
But your spreadsheet was a different program.
That was a community compact, but
That's
there
right.
may be
Compact, but this-
projects
MassWorks is a set of,
totally different.
Right.
yeah.
Right.
MassWorks paid for the Four Corners sewer.
Yes, I remember that, and so my question, I don't know, I interrupted you, or?
No, go ahead.
So my question was, have any of the department heads had ideas about things that MassWorks might fund?
Becky, that's a great question. One of the things that I had been working on and talking to property owners on Station Ave was to improve the parking, maybe eventually tie it to the back of Prescott, paving the cut through to Broad Meadow, and working there. There's also some movement on the May and Halley property, potential for housing development out there. There's been some talk about that. So we had talked about a potential MassWorks grant application to help us with the construction of all of this parking and wetlands restoration, things like that would have to happen around the Station Ave area. We wanted to make it shovel ready. Unfortunately, there's just not enough time to get it done this year.
Right.
So that's something that's on our brains, that's something that we're talking about, that's probably gonna hopefully come up next year.
Okay.
Other than that, there really hasn't been anything that's jumped out relative to a MassWorks type project this year. But I'm glad John brought this up because it's a great program.
Right,
And
well,
it's
and
done a
that-
lot of good for us.
That particular vaguely defined project might be a good one. When I looked at the actual website for MassWorks, they seem to be making a big pitch about housing.
Yep.
And I wondered how the housing production plan, and if, it would be lovely if we had some kind of a plan in mind about some place that we could actually look to build some housing.
One of the things that helped the Four Corners grant application go over the top was the Moulton development for
55.
for the senior housing. That was a
Mhm.
very key component to it because they want to see housing, economic development, job creation,
Right.
infrastructure improvement. So it's a combination of everything. That's why when we're looking at Station Ave, the May and Halley property is so important because that's been cleaned up under 21E. The site is clean, ready to be developed. And there has been some talk about 10 units or something like that there. That would be a nice tie-in to an improvement along this whole area.
And
So-
are they considering that to be over 55 housing?
I don't know what the thought process is there,
Or-
Becky. I'm not sure.
How, is there a way that we could be influential in whoever's making those decisions?
When they come forward to the planning board with a subdivision proposal or a site plan proposal, that'd be the time to do it. But right now, there hasn't been any formal application. There's been a lot of discussion. There's been
Right.
a lot of ideas. I think, John, you might have been on the planning board when they
Right.
first started talking about.
It's been a
the
couple of
Manhattan.
years, right?
Well, the Manhattan property ran into the issue of, as you would expect in an oil,
Yeah, The cleanup.
kerosene, diesel fuel operation, there's gonna be some contamination
Sure.
in the ground, and the first people that were interested in it wanted nothing
to do with that. Yeah.
And then.
It's being cleaned. Yeah. So anyway, that's the type of project, to answer your question, Becky, that staff has been talking about. And we've been working with some of the developers and property owners in the area, but there just wasn't enough time to get it in this year. But I think, next year, that's gonna be probably number one on our list moving forward.
Very good. Any updates on the A through L?
Oh, wait, before we move
yeah,
on from
sorry.
other business, we talked about the liquor license for the outdoor event on
Oh,
Thursday.
yes. I'd asked the board to vote to approve a rain date of Friday,
No,
June 14th
14th.
for the town field, for the, Becky, I'm sorry,
Groton Conservation
Thank you.
Trust
annual,
Sunset Celebration, it's
Yeah,
in,
that's right.
we signed it, something like that.
yeah. So I'd asked to approve a rain date if they need it for Friday, June 14th.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, sure.
On that topic,
Yeah.
I think it would probably be a good idea to modify the form that we give people to,
Ask for rain date?
who are gonna request to do this, to put a specific thing in there for a rain date. And they don't have to have a rain date, but,
Right.
it'll save a lot of extra running around for a bunch of people if they,
Is it really supposed to be bad Thursday?
I have been, I'm not the
Yeah,
weather
this-
person in my family, but I've been informed that
Please tell me Friday's gonna be nice. I'll check
Friday,
with
I believe, is gonna be nice.
Brilliant.
there is rain in the forecast for
What's happening
Thursday.
Friday for you,
I
Mike?
was gonna ask for the day off to play golf, but that's a whole nother discussion.
should
I
be
gotta check
fine.
with the chair and talk about that. Update on the, ongoing issues list. Senior Center building project, continues to move in a very, very positive, direction. If you guys, what I would ask you to do, any member that's interested in getting a tour of that facility, let me know when you wanna go down there and I'll set that up. I really want you to go down there and see it. It's really starting to take shape. The windows are installed. They're starting to put the interior, wallboard up. Tile is going up. It's really taking off. We have a meeting tomorrow at 1 o'clock. I'm looking forward to getting down there to see, how things have progressed since last week. So anybody interested, please contact me. I'll set it up. We'll bring you down, get your hard hat, and walk you through the building. It's gonna be spectacular when it's done. It's a great, design and layout.
So are you having a meeting down there Thursday morning?
No, I wanted to tell you, we changed our meeting date to,
Oh, by the way.
Cause I was
Tuesday.
gonna tell you, I'll meet you there. You
okay, well,
said you hadn't rushed back.
if you want, our meeting, well, it's gonna rain. Probably not a good idea to go down
All
if
right.
it's raining
No,
heavily.
no,
We'll figure it out.
not to worry about
We'll
it.
figure it out. So that's ongoing, and that's going well. Prescott School Sprinkler System Project, I had a great meeting this afternoon with Bruce Easom. As you know, we've turned over the project management to him. He has gone out and he has solicited pricing and proposals to bring an engineer in to actually design the installation. So that's in process. He'll be going out to bid on that. Hopefully, his plan is to go out in September or October with the actual bid specs to install the sprinkler system. So he's well on his way working on that. I thank Bruce for his hard work on
And
that.
is the design anticipated to be funded through the CPC, through their
Correct.
already existing?
Already
approvals?
approved money. Both the engineering and the installation.
Yeah, okay.
Bruce believes there's enough money to do both. With regards to the Route 119 sidewalk installation, for those of you who were going up Route 119 today, you saw some work out there. They were fixing some of the deficiencies. As a matter of fact, they redid the entire area in front of the hair salon. That was an issue that needed to be fixed, so they were out there fixing that, so they're doing their punch list items. Did you
Where?
see?
Could you clarify the hair salon?
Yes.
Yes, there's
It's
a
not a
number
hair
of
salon?
hair salons
We
on
don't know
119.
where you are.
On 119 before CVS, that's not a hair salon?
Oh, the
Oh,
green
there's a
building, the
little
door
one.
with,
Yeah.
the
Oh,
There's a
building with the
little
green
small
door.
one there.
Yes, okay.
Okay.
The
It's a
building
little
with the-
building.
Yeah, yeah.
With the green
Towards
door.
CVS, not
Yeah.
here in the center or.
No, no, no.
But there's about a half a dozen hair places along 119
Okay, it's the one approach to CVS, the little, it's a cute little building.
with the
Yeah.
green door.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
So that's ongoing. The,
But I
floor-
have a question.
Yes.
Where are we at on the additional streetlights?
It's been audited with the light department. I've given the okay to install them. It's on their schedule. When they can get to it, they'll install them.
Okay.
But it has been approved.
All
And
right.
Kevin Kelly has assured me they'll be installed.
This was a request that I initiated,
Yep.
that we increase streetlights for both ends where the new sidewalk is,
Oh.
so that it has the same amount of lighting as the center
Yeah.
of town.
Good idea.
Because it's very dark out there. It's not so much this time of year, but in the winter,
Right.
you know.
And it's dark at 4.
Yeah, so the light department will be installing. As a matter of fact, Chief Luke picked, I think, 4 locations based on John's recommendation, and we asked the light department to install those. Now,
Great.
I want, this is important, I'm glad you brought that up, John, because our street light budget is $15,000. And it was set at $15,000 $7 or 8 years ago when the board shut off a majority of the lights in town to save money, because our bill was like
At least
30,000.
2/3,
We
yeah.
cut it in half. However, the light department has gone through a major installation of LED lights, which is a lot cheaper. So our bill has been cut down further. So we are in the process of turning some of the lights back on, staying within the $15,000 budget at the request of our residents. The thing that John brought up is a perfect example of how to address a safety concern. So we are doing that.
I think, is that also something that might be covered by Green Communities money?
You know, Becky, I don't know, that's a good question.
I don't know if the addition of the lights may count somehow for
Yes.
those.
The conversion to LED lighting
Yeah,
was
that, because that's a
big-
definite savings towards our 20% goal.
Right.
Oh, yes.
But it's been done more than 1 year ago.
Has it been?
Well, the new ones aren't, but you gotta look at,
I gotta look at when we did it.
yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Florence Roach Elementary School feasibility study, the building committee, again, I think I mentioned this earlier, June 25th. I will post it as a select board meeting for any of you who are interested in attending. Library,
So this is the feasibility study committee,
yes.
as opposed to a building committee?
Well, what do we call that?
It's all
committee?
the same.
It's all the same, right? I think we call it a building committee.
There's a
It's called the
difference
building
bet-
committee.
There's
It's
a
called the
difference
Florence
between
Roach-
feasibility and building.
Well, the building committee is doing the
MSBA
feasibility
considers the
study.
feasibility to be
Correct.
the first step
Yep.
of the building
But it is the building committee.
project.
Their first approach is doing the feasibility study. Library roof repair, I issued a notice to proceed on that project today. Contracts are signed, so that project is well underway. Highway garage renovations, the contract was sent out today. They have 10 days to get back to me with their approval on the contract. Once I receive that, I will issue a notice to proceed, and we will schedule the first building committee meeting with the contractor as soon as that's done. So I'm waiting, so within the next 10 days, I will bring the building committee back in. You noticed tonight that there was a new name on that building committee list. Peter Mayette asked not to be reappointed, so I asked Mike Bouchard, who has experience with the fire station building committee, to step in, and he reluctantly agreed to do that for me. So that's it, that's all I have for updates.
All right, are there any liaison reports? All right.
I think everything's going real well with the Groton Electric Lights since I took
Oh,
over.
good. Nary a problem has come to your attention, perfect.
Thanks.
All right, then we have one set of minutes to approve. Did anyone have corrections, questions, or comments on the minutes of June 3rd? I would entertain a motion to approve them as presented.
I so moved.
I'll second that. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. Nothing else? We are adjourned.
All right, a record.
8:20?